Hi everyone, welcome to this interview by Core Recruitment. Thank you very much for joining us today. Core Recruitment's an international recruitment consultancy and we specialize in mid to senior level across all of our chosen sectors. We are running this interview series to inject some positivity into 2026, and we're speaking to some really great inspirational business leaders to get your day kick-started in the right way. Or you could be watching it in the evening, no one's going to judge you. Now, we've got some really great interviews that we've recorded already, and all of those can be viewed on our website, which is www.corerecruitment.com. So please go in, have a bit of a look around, and see what takes your fancy. Now, we're really lucky today to be joined by Richard Lewis. Hi, Richard. How are you?
Hi, Christian. Very well, thank you. Thank you for the
Excellent.
invitation.
You're very welcome. So for those of you who don't know kind of like Coaching In Group and RedCat, can you tell us a little bit about the business and what you operate?
Yeah, RedCat Hospitality oversee two businesses, the Coaching In Group, which is 36 hotels across England and Wales, um, and RedCat Independent Pubs is a separate business, which is a collection of pubs and inns that also operate around England. So we've got 70 businesses overall, and we've got a turnover around about 120 million.
Nice. Now, this isn't your first foray into pubs. I know that you were in pubs before as well, but a major part of your kind of career journey and experience has also been within retail as well. So can you give us just a little bit about how you think that's developed your leadership style?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate, I think, with the roles I've had. I've loved every job I've done and all the businesses I've worked in. I started my career as a graduate trainee at Woolworths. I was there for almost 10 years. I think in there probably the peak of their performance when they were making money. Before I then moved on to Sainsbury's and spent 5 years with Sainsbury's helping them to develop their non-food offer. Before I then went overseas to work for a company called The Warehouse, which is the largest general merchandise business in New Zealand. So that was my first experience of international, and that was interesting. Having been in retail, which is very dynamic, very fast moving, very competitive. I think I developed a lot of kind of commercial skills in order to kind of help drive performance whilst bring about change. But I think in an international experience, and I was in New Zealand for 7 years. Whilst you may have a lot of retail experience, you have to learn really quickly about you're in a different market with different competitors, a different consumer behavior, a different culture. It's very much you have to learn the environment very quickly. So I found that fascinating, and both personally and professionally, really enjoyed my time in New Zealand. And then when I came back, I was just considering, staying in retail, but the opportunity of hospitality just came up. Actually, Rooney at Green King was looking for someone with retail experience, believe it or not, in his business. And I joined Green King. Felt like a bit of a gamble, kind of starting a new sector, but completely fell in love with it. It's just such an amazing sector to work in. Um, it- Whilst my retail experience, I think, was relevant and helpful, I learned very quickly hospitality is much more a people business. People, great people, can make such a difference to performance. Whilst all the kind of tricks of the trade in retail are important, it's very much a people business. And it's not a transaction. When you're selling things in retail, you're selling products on a shelf, it's quite functional, whereas hospitality is very much about emotional experiences. So that was a fascinating way to learn, and particularly in pubs, every pub has its own story. It's not like you're running a branded organization. Certainly the pub business that I started with Green King, that wasn't the case. Every pub was important in its own right. So I think I learned to be curious, a fast learner, and I think you learn to be very commercial. I think to work in both businesses, and I have to say I've thoroughly enjoyed all my time in hospitality over the last 15 years.
Absolutely. Now, New Zealand isn't the normal trodden path. People go to Dubai, people go to Europe, people kind of go elsewhere where you just getting to the other side of the world, or what drew you there?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's really about I followed somebody who I'd worked with at Woolworths, who'd been a great mentor of mine. He'd gone out to be the chief executive of the warehouse. He was out there for a few months, and he called me up and said, "Look, this is a great business, it's a great place, but there's a big job to do. Why don't you come out and see if you fancy it?" And of course, I did do, and fell in love with New Zealand and fell in love with the role and the opportunity, and the rest, shall we say, is history.
So when I was a kid, I used to get £2 pocket money a week, and in Scotland, trust me, that was a lot of money. And I used to go up to Woolworths every single Saturday, and I'd get a cassette, and I'd spend the rest of the money on sweets, and it was basically like the best place in the world. Obviously, the world changes and all of that kind of side of things, and things move on. But do you think that business just had its time? Do you think they could have done anything to kind of like, stay around? I know they still operate in other countries, but they're not in the UK anymore, right?
Well, it was a UK business, so no, when they demerged from Kingfisher, I think, structurally, uh, things changed for them. That, became an independent business, as opposed to being part of a group. Um, what do I think happened? I think it was a classic case of new competition doing what Woolworths should have been doing better. Um, they were essentially a discount business that I think probably lost its way. They were part of their strength was they were jack of all trades, master of none. I think they tried to kind of focus into a few areas and didn't do that particularly well. And they were under, intense competition, not just on the high street, but from the supermarkets who were getting into non-food. And it's what's interesting is with the Woolworths demise, I think is several players have gone in and filled that space brilliantly. B&M Bargains being a great example. They didn't try to be anything other than be a great discount site with general merchandise, and covered a lot of categories and did that extremely well and with no frills. And I think Woolworths tried to go a little bit up market and kind of lost its way.
Got it. Well, yeah, good fond memories though, but there you go. Now, you went back and you did a qualification at Harvard Business School, which isn't something that I see every day. Can you tell us a little bit about what you did and what you got from the process?
Yeah, wow, it's a few years ago now. I think it was about 2010 when I went. And it was whilst I was in New Zealand, as part of my development, there wasn't huge amount of kind of professional programs available in Australasia that I felt kind of meted my needs. And this program was at Harvard was I guess it was like a mini MBA. It was an eight week residential program. And it's called Advanced Management Program, or AMP for short. Um, it's not actually a qualification; it's a certificate. So it's fortunate we didn't have to kind of sit any exams or do any dissertations or anything. But it was to say it was a very intense kind of 8 weeks. You're essentially reading kind of 3 or 4 case studies every day, and you were working kind of 6 out of the 7 days doing these case studies, sat in kind of lecture theatres, discussing the papers. And they covered, all of the normal kind of MBA kind of topics, but, a lot of focus around strategy, technology, finance, culture, international politics, those kind of things. And I have to say, it's a great way to kind of learn a lot of what's happened over the kind of previous 20 or 30 years in business and really studying, um, you know, certain brands and certain kind of topics that had gone on that you may have kind of read in the newspaper, but you really get into the detail of what had happened and, you discuss them and the consequences of them. So it's a great way to look back and learn about business. It was a great way to network and meet people. There were people there from all around the world who were all kind of um, aspiring leaders and in some cases not just business leaders. There was people from politics and all sorts there. And I think for me it was the big picture you really pick up. It's the kind of stuff you just don't really pick up, day to day. I mean, one of the sessions I particularly enjoyed on the strategy side was about technology, and we talked about technology of the future that was going to have an impact. This was in 2010. So these were things that were going to have an impact in the next 3 years. And And it kind of it's quite ironic. You look back at them now. We talked about the smartphones. The iPhone had just come out. I think the iPad came out whilst we were in Boston at the time. And the second thing was social media. Facebook was still relatively new and was quite unknown really at that time. And then cloud technology. So these were three things that were for most of us were kind of one or two people have got iPhones, but most people were still on the old kind of HTCs and Blackberries and things like that. So, and these were things when we went back to the workplace that had kind of quite a profound impact. They were all things that were very relevant. So, it was fascinating with things like that, that they're really, whilst they did a lot of looking back at the case studies and learning, they were also kind of looking forward at what was coming and how that was going to kind of shape business and organizations. And after I came back to the UK in 2011, and the use of mobile phones and social media was a huge part of what we did in pubs. We really start to embrace that and start to educate, our pub managers around, how to use these to kind of market locally. And you kind of fast forward to kind of now, and it's all just taken for granted these things. So it was very good from that perspective, but it was I was very fortunate to do. I have to say it was a real privilege to spend 8 weeks in Harvard and to be exposed to the kind of quality of people and the quality of professors that we worked with.
Well, I mean, there's multiple other things in your CV that kind of like, do stand out when you look at LinkedIn and all of that kind of stuff. And one of the other ones was the board advisor role that you have with Pennies, and you've been there for kind of like over 4 years now. Could you just, I mean, that's a dream opportunity for like so many people. Like we do a lot of work in the non-exec space. Can you tell us about how you secured it? I guess what contribution you make and also what you get back out of it by consequence?
Yeah, I'm really proud of my association with Pennies. I mean, it's an unpaid role. It's not it's voluntary. I mean, for those of you who don't know what Pennies is, Pennies is it's a charity in its own right, but it essentially helps businesses to raise money for their chosen charity through the point of purchase, through credit card transactions, whether they be online or at the till. Um, and pennies help to facilitate that payment and pay the charities. So I introduced this at Green King when I was there after a lot of what was this going to do to kind of the customer journey? Was it going to slow up transaction time? All those kind of things. But we launched pennies, and we were staggered at the impact it had in terms of how much we raised for Macmillan and also just how much our teams engaged with it. They really wanted to do good and saw this as a way to kind of, help customers make micro donations. So on the back of that, I got approached just after COVID to see if I'd be willing to join an advisory board for retail and hospitality, working for the amazing Alison Hutchinson, who is the CEO at Pennies. And it's really what they're looking for is just advice really around what's happening in the marketplace, what are the kind of the consumer trends, but more importantly, it's a helpful way to kind of help them to get introduced to other people, in your network. And because pennies, I would say, is one of the best kept secrets. A lot of people don't know about it, but when you've got it, it's a very easy way to do really good for your local causes. It's great for the engagement of your teams. And it's really about how we can help Alison, get introductions to more people to be able to kind of get pennies in more businesses. And I mean, just recently we had an awards with pennies where the teams all come together. They're celebrating their 15-year anniversary, and they've just achieved 75 million of micro donations
That's
over those
incredible.
last 15 years for 1,000 charities. So it's a great business. It's great to be part of it, and Pennies is such a wonderful team. Yeah, I mean, my role has purely been trying to use my network to introduce pennies to them and to Alison.
Excellent. I mean, it sounds like a brilliant 75 million is a massive achievement. Congratulations on that to them and Penny to you and Pennies. Now, coming back to the pub industry, and like the pub industry seems to be having is having multiple challenges at the moment. Now, some businesses we speak to are talking about how well they're doing, and other businesses are obviously completely on the other side of things. What do you think it takes to make a successful pub company at the moment?
Well, we said we were going to try and keep this positive. I mean, it is fair to say. I mean, the pub industry has been going through its challenges. I think even before I came back from New Zealand, the smoking ban, I think, caused a lot of challenge for the pub industry, and then since then we've had you know all sorts of challenges from COVID through to the war in Ukraine, a number of budget challenges that continue. So I think to be successful, I think clearly it's important to stay relevant to the customer and to make sure your offers competitive and relevant. I think it's important to make sure you've got investment in your business in the right places. So, the last 2 years at RedCat, we've had a lot of work to do, I think, to deal with what's being thrown at us structurally. I think we've tried to um, exit our businesses that we felt we couldn't recover from a loss-making situation. So we went through an administration of several sites, which then enabled us to refinance. We've invested in some sites where that investment has turned around those sites from loss-making to profit, and also we've invested in the coaching in group, which we see as our kind of primary growth engine. And that's been
Mm.
investment not just in CapEx, but also in terms of acquisitions, new sites, and also we've been investing in our team and our infrastructure. We're, believe it or not, the fourth largest pubs with rooms business in the UK.
Wow.
And as a result of that, we've invested, in our revenue team, to really help, maximize, that third revenue stream. We don't just have food and beverage, we also have rooms, and that's kind of 40% of our business, and that's, an area that we've invested heavily in over those last 2 years. So I think to answer your question, I think, clearly kind of trying to get out of the businesses that present an opportunity to be a drag has been really urgent and important for us. But then investing in the parts of the business where you see the growth and kind of executing that well has been really important. And I've been very fortunate to have a great team around me to help us to do that. And so far, so good. But I think the third part would clearly be, you've got to have a really strong cost agenda as well, because the costs are coming in at such a fast rate. You're almost running fast just to stand still. So you've got to constantly be trying to find ways to get cost out of the business. And clearly, you have to try and do that without having any real impact on either your team or the customer. I think it's very easy to take cost out, and either your team or your customers see those things and they have consequences. So we've been really working hard to try and work on the areas that are not impacting our team and not impacting our guests.
100%. Now, if you could be in charge of UK government policy for one day, well, 1 minute, well, 1 hour, well, just to do one thing, you can choose multiple things if you want to. I'm not going to hold you to that. We're fantasizing here. But kind of like, what do you think the government could do to give the hospitality sector, the pub sector, like specifically, a break at the moment? What do you think it needs?
Well, I think it's got to be a change from constantly thinking you can keep adding more costs onto business and then expecting them to grow. We've got an economic challenge at the moment about, having growth. Growth's only kind of come from businesses investing. I think to my time at Green King, and I think certainly to our time in RedCat, the biggest growth comes from where you're investing. If you invest well, new sites, CapEx, that's where the real turbocharging growth comes, and job creation. So I think we've got to have an environment where either investment is incentivized and encouraged, or we've got to have an environment where there's some relief in the system, where some of the kind of cumulative effect of all the costs that have been coming in over the last few years are taken out. And I think the government's obviously finding that challenging at the moment. So whether it's a proper review that we've been promised around business rates, or some other form of tax relief. I think you can't expect businesses to be able to create the cash to get investment if constantly, all of their kind of their growth and their profits has been taken up with new costs that didn't exist before. And so yeah, I think some form of relief, significant relief that helps businesses to invest and grow, or some form of incentive to invest, I think is what's needed. And um, yeah, I think that, the last budget in particular, I think has, really brought the hospitality business together to kind of try to find a way to collectively influence that cause.
So, Richard, not every day in business is a sunny day, and everybody's got their own personal stories about kind of like things that have gone well and things that have maybe not gone so well.
Mm.
Just in terms of kind of like, I think everyone lives on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram, kind of like telling everyone they've got their perfect life going on, and I'm convinced it's not true. In terms of that, like, can you tell us about a situation where maybe things haven't gone as well for you? Perhaps the F word has come up and what you've done and what you've learned from that.
Yeah, I think if we're all honest, we all have good days and bad days and good weeks and bad weeks. I think if I look back, even in the roles that I've kind of thoroughly enjoyed, there's been some things that haven't kind of worked as I would have hoped. I mean, when I was in New Zealand, um, I went to work for a non-food business, and within a year, we'd set ourselves a challenge to open the first hypermarket in Australasia, and we achieved that, which was an amazing feat, for a business of our size. And we got to three, with huge competition from the duopoly in New Zealand, the two other food operators who did everything to try and prevent us from opening. And to cut a long story short, given the high levels of investment and some of the returns that we were getting, it was pretty evident it was going to be a very long strategic play if we were really going to kind of persist with it. And the board took a decision to exit. And this had been something that I'd led very proudly and assembled a team. And yeah, personally, that was quite devastating. Something that you'd put your heart and soul into, and that you felt and you'd convince yourself was the right thing to do, and you could sense you were starting to kind of get some wins. So that was really hard. I mean, if I look back, there were lots of positives that came from it. Whilst we came out of fresh food, we we grew some new categories like health and beauty, pharmacy, grocery, you know, pet food. There were some kind of categories that we could do really well, that we grew, and they really contributed to the growth for the kind of the next 3 years. But you always have this sense of disappointment that you didn't, achieve the ultimate goal. Um, so I think the reality is you've got to look back and say, look, it doesn't define you. And it wasn't actually failure. It wasn't, I didn't see it as failure personally. I was gutted that we didn't see it through, but I don't think it defines you. And actually, you kind of look back over the longer period, and you kind of think, well, actually, I actually learned a hell of a lot from the whole experience, and the business did as well. But it's not the end of the world. You move on, and there's other opportunities. So um, yeah, I think. Sometimes failure is a good thing. Sometimes things going wrong is a good thing. It's all part of the learning curve. And I think I think it's important as a leader to try and pull out the positives for the team, the business, and also to kind of, assess yourself as a leader. Well, what could you have done differently? And I think certainly that experience for me has helped me, hugely on other kind of transformational turnaround roles that I've had, since then.
Absolutely. Now, in terms of your previous career, current career, just industry figures, like, who inspires you, kind of like from a leadership perspective, who do you look at and think they're really nailing it, they're killing it, or who's given you some good life lessons previously?
Well, I think in my career journey, probably the people who've inspired me, I think I'd probably start with my dad, actually. My dad he got no qualifications. He was a messenger boy when he first started, and he finished his career, as a professional at BT, but I always kind of learned from him, you know, the kind of real kind of basic ethics of hard work and being professional. Um, and I guess as a kid, I always like looked up to him and aspired to be him, you know. So believe it or not, he's certainly not anyone famous or anyone that anyone would know. But it started for me that I mean that's probably what got me, you know, to follow education and to get into business. But then I've had some people, the people who've really inspired me. Whilst there's lots of, senior people who inspire me, I think the people who've really helped me on my career path. My first kind of general manager, who saw something in me that I didn't know I got, and just, gave me he gave me the feedback that, I could achieve a lot more than just being an area manager or a general manager. And then his boss actually took a punt on me and actually gave me the opportunity. So I joined as a graduate trainee to be a store manager within 2 years. I was actually running a site within a year, and within 2.5 years, I was thrown in the deep end as an area manager. So it's a leader called Leo McKee, who took that risk on me and put the support around me. And so I owe him a lot, but I have to say, you get inspired by taking risks on other people on the basis of someone took a risk on you one day, and you
Mm.
don't feel you let anyone down. So I certainly remember him. And then Ian Morris, who's the guy who took me out to New Zealand. I mean, he's always been a great mentor, and a great role model for me. And what I saw in him, not just as a great leader, um, but he also, did a lot of people around him to develop and get the best out of people by investing in their development. Um, so, and then finally, obviously Rooney. I mean, I've worked with Rooney now for 10 years. He's always inspired me in terms of his ambition, his deal making, his commerciality, um, and his ability to grow businesses. In my time with him at Green King, we doubled the business. I think he doubled it before I arrived, and then we doubled it again, in the time that I was there. Um, so they'd be the people who've really kind of inspired me and supported my career. And I think, I've learned a lot from them and tried to replicate some of that with the people who've worked with me.
Absolutely. Now, in terms of the actual sector itself, I mean, there's so much change all the time happening within the sector, and this can be seen from kind of an experiential perspective, from an operations perspective, supply chain. Technology is probably kind of like the major driver at the moment, especially with everything coming in from an AI perspective. The robots are coming. But in terms of like what you're really excited about coming up over the next kind of like couple of years and how you're preparing for that, it would be great to get your insight.
Yeah, well, I think you've touched on. I mean, the biggest transformational change I think that's likely to come over the next 2 years has got to be AI. I
Hmm.
mean, if I was studying at Harvard now and they were talking about what's going to hit us in the next 3 years, that has got to be top of the agenda. And I think the reality is so far, I mean, whilst we're all impressed around, the speed, the processing, and, some of the new kind of gadgets that we've all got at our fingertips, I don't think we've really seen the real impact that AI is going to have on all parts of, daily lives, not just work. So that fascinates me, and I think it's going to be interesting how, we blend AI into hospitality, which is such a people-orientated business that I said earlier. So I think, what are we doing about it at the moment? Well, at the moment, we're trying to get a number of kind of, systems in place that are going to help us drive, a more efficient business and a more effective business, both in terms of customer data as well as, financial reporting. And I think AI will play a big part in that. And uh, the people we're working with at the moment are developing their own forms of AI. So, our guest data now is AI enabled. Our labor scheduling is becoming more AI enabled. So I think it's starting to have an impact, but I genuinely think at the moment this is the tip of the iceberg. I think there's still so much to come, and I think if anything, we're perhaps overplaying its impact on the short term, but I think in the long term we'll see, quite significant change. And I think what you do see with technology nowadays is, its speed of change is a lot faster than what technology change has been in the past. So, yeah, watch this space. I think that's the one we're all kind of keeping close to, and I think we're all a little bit concerned about, going too quickly into areas that actually, you know, look quite interesting, but possibly aren't going to be, um, not going to be easy to get a good return on investment. So, and certainly with RedCat, I don't think we're going to be innovators in this place. We're kind of just trying to get the best use out of, the AI from the, you know, service providers that we're currently working with.
Absolutely. Now, if there's future leaders who are watching this, who are kind of like looking at you thinking like, oh my goodness, the chief executive of you, and he's done this, and he's done that, and he's done all that kind of stuff. If you could give any advice to kind of like your younger self or kind of future aspiring hospitality leaders, what do you think that would be?
Wow. I think uh, build your network, get really good people around you, get good advice, link up with people who've done it. Um, I think um, I think if you've got an idea, be passionate, be bold, go for it. Um, and follow your intuition would be the other thing. I think, textbooks and Harvard Business School's all great, but whatever, but you can't beat intuition and you know, um, the real kind of roll your sleeves up and get stuck in. I think um, you know, Harvard case studies are all context, but the reality is, I think you know, real success comes from rolling your sleeves up and doing the hard work and getting stuck in, but having great people around you who can guide you. And I think that's what's always helped me is, I've always had a good guide of experienced people who have either looked out for me or guided me. And so I would say, your network's your biggest strength.
Absolutely. And sorry, last question in terms of coaching and RedCat. I mean, what's the plan for this year? What can we expect from you guys?
Well, I think more of what we've said. We're acquisitive. We're looking for more hotels to add to the coaching in group portfolio. There's more capex to come, so we're looking to strengthen our estate. Um, and yeah, I think we're looking to build our reputation and our profile more. I think a bit like Penny's, the coaching in group again is one of the best kept secrets. It was only 18 businesses 4 years ago. It's now 36. We've got a good national presence. We've just won the Which Award. So I think it's important we start to build that brand and let more people know what a great business and a great culture and a great guest experience it is.
And I think it's amazing also that Kevin's the original like founder's son has now just been promoted to managing director. Adam, is that right?
He has, and I think that's been an important part of its success that we've seen the opportunity to grow it. And when I joined and Kevin left, I guess we looked at the opportunity as do we bring someone else in to to lead and grow that business? But the business wasn't broken at all. It's got a really strong team. They really know and own the DNA of that business.
Mm,
And I think its success and its growth in the last 2 years been very much part of the existing team stepping up and moving forward. And um, yeah, I still think the best is yet to come from that business.
amazing. Richard, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights. I'm sure people will find it very valuable. And yeah, good luck with all of the acquisitions and all hard work in 2026.
Thank you, Krishna.